All right, in this video, we are going to be talking about what is next for Ian Garry, as well as just abusing Colby Covington. He deserves it all. So, first of all, how did we get into this situation? Colby Covington has just gone on to Submission Radio. That's the one. Colby Covington's just gone on to Submission Radio and officially ducked Ian Garry by saying things like Ian Garry's wife didn't get on her knees and beg him for a fight. He said things like his tootsie still hurts and the doctor says that he's not healthy enough to get back into the cage.
You serious?
Which is a joke. Which is an absolute joke, right? So we're going to talk about what is next for Ian Garry. But first of all, just let me blow off some steam about Coward Covington. That's his name now, okay? Coward Covington. He said in that interview with Submission Radio, it's done all the rounds, so I'm sure you've heard it somewhere, but he said on that interview with Submission Radio that he's still injured, but he would be available for a short notice fight if something happened in Manchester or if something happened during Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler. So he's not that injured, is he? Then he went on to call out Bilal, which is just another joke. It's just him ducking another fight, him calling out Bilal, okay? Bilal is going to be fighting Leon Edwards. So Colby Covington calling out Bilal at this point is the exact same thing as a dog barking behind a glass window. That's what Coward Covington is doing. Bilal isn't going to be fighting Colby next. Bilal's going to be fighting for a title. And then Colby Covington had the audacity of calling Bilal Muhammad a ranking squatter, right? When Bilal is the one that stepped up on short notice to fight Gilbert Burns on the promise that he would get the next title shot, when he already deserved the next title shot, and then he didn't get it. So fair enough for Bilal Muhammad to just sit there with his arms crossed and look at Dana White directly at every single pay-per-view. Bilal Muhammad is there in the front row, just staring at Dana White, going, give me my title shot, give me my title shot, give me my title shot. That's Bilal Muhammad's only job now. Colby Covington calls him a ranking squatter when Colby fights so slowly that all of his wins have left the sport. Think about that. He is the biggest, most embarrassing loser in the entire UFC. Out of John Jones, out of Merab Dvalishvili, out of Israel Adesanya and his constant copium and his fans constantly coping that Izzy just had a bad night against Sean Strickland. Out of anyone that you can think of in the UFC, in the entire organization, out of all 700 athletes, Molly the Can McCann, Colby Covington is the biggest pussy loser coward in the entire organization. I've never been so angry at a fighter as I am right now. Fuck Colby Covington. Anyway, now that I've worked that out of my system, thanks for listening to that. Let's get on to Ian Garry and what I think is going to be next for him, okay? Because Ian Garry's been left in the dark now, and the UFC need to get him on UFC 303 or on UFC 304, okay? And just the way that this business works, that's their business model of getting a young up-and-comer on cards like that, either in a hometown or underneath Conor McGregor. The company is going to do it. And this is from a company and from a man in Dana White, right, that put on fights during 2019 on 2020 on an island somewhere, okay? So if you think that Colby Covington saying no to them is going to slow their plans down, you do not know Dana White at all. Before I get into my prediction of what I think is going to be next for Ian Garry, I do want to say that I'm doing a big push on this channel to try and get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of July for my birthday. So if this is your first time here, or if you're a ghost watcher, if you could go ahead and hit subscribe, that would mean the absolute world to me. If you've already been a subscriber of this channel, thank you so much on helping me on the way to 1,000 subs. It's a massive milestone for small channels. But bloody get your little brother to subscribe, mate. When you're at the petrol station filling up the car, and the guy's like, "That'll be $75." Just slide your phone on the table and be like, "Subscribe to this guy. Subscribe to Dougie's Corner. And let's get this channel to 1,000 subs." Okay, moving along. So Ian Garry, right? He has said and put out there that he has said yes to MVP. And honestly, I've talked about this in the past on this channel. I think MVP can beat Ian Garry. Okay, they have very similar styles. But because they are both very like settled in their way as rangy strikers, and that's what I mean by like very similar styles. Obviously, Ian Garry keeps his hands up and dances around the outside, where MVP just puts both of his hands down and lunges straight in. But they're both rangy strikers with sort of counter-striking abilities, right? I do think that if MVP was in there with Ian Garry, I think MVP would win that fight. I really do. I think because they have the same styles, but MVP just has so much experience in the game, and because he knows that his career is like right there in the UFC. Obviously, he's built a massive career outside of the UFC. But when it comes to inside the UFC, if he wants a belt, he has to win every single fight because just the time is against him. His age is what it is. So I do think when you take all of the experience of MVP as well as just that need to win, he would end up eking out a decision, right? But there is one other fighter out there who is in the top 5 of the rankings. And he's also dropped back to a once a year sort of a schedule. And when you look at the way that the UFC usually matches up fights, this mold fits perfectly, okay? They like to take a young up-and-comer and put them up against an aging veteran. That way you get all of that clout that the aging veteran carries and put it on the back of the young up-and-coming fighter. And this young up-and-coming fighter, Ian Garry, needs all the help he can get because he is loathed by the fans. Thank God that Colby Covington came along and started to redirect the fans' hatred because they need to hate someone. Colby Covington's the guy now. So if you look at Volkanovski, right, when he's on the come-up, they put him in there against old Aljo. All the old heads watch that fight. They watch Volk piece up Aljo over 3 rounds and they go, damn, this Volk guy is something real. He's really something to watch out about. That's the sort of classic move of the UFC. We see it time and time again. Look what they've done with Paddy Pimblett. Well, in the rankings, Kamaru Usman is just sitting there. And in a division that has gotten so busy and popping, I don't need 2 Colby Covingtons plus a Bilal Muhammad sitting in the top 5. Like, what the fuck is this, right? What is this top 5 going on here? Like, welcome to the top 5, yeah? It's a hotel. Come in, get a top 5, make a bed, and just fucking sleep on it for 2 years. No. It's time to fuck off with that whole attitude, all right? We're fighting in Manchester. Book Bilal Muhammad. Colby Covington, right? Give him a yes or a no. If he doesn't want to fight with, I don't know, JDM, right? Put him in there against JDM. If he doesn't want that fight, just get him out of the UFC. Honest to God, get him out of the UFC. It's time to get the top 5 moving. And that means we need Kamaru Usman to get in there against Ian Garry next. It's the perfect matchup, especially since the UFC want to build up Ian Garry, and Leon Edwards already showed Ian Garry how to beat Kamaru Usman twice. It is the perfect sort of thing. We need to get this idea going that if you don't fight within a 12-month period, you're out of the rankings or you drop out of the top 10, okay? I know Dominic Cruz just shat himself, but you cannot just sit in the rankings, especially in the top 5, for 12 months and not fight. So it's time to get this thing moving. It's time for Ian Garry versus Kamaru Usman. And I do expect, because we have UFC 303 and UFC Manchester coming up, within the next week to 2 weeks, we are going to hear confirmation fight news about who Ian Garry is going to be fighting next. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was going to be Kamaru Usman. That way you could do, I don't know, JDM versus Shavkat in Australia, and then you've got 2 clear number 1 contenders, right? And whoever is the healthiest can fight the new champ of Bilal Muhammad later in January. It's easy, it's done. And what do you do with Colby Covington? Just fire him. Send him to the WWE with the other delusional ex-MMA fighters. The WWE is perfect for them. It's a made-up world with made-up storylines and made-up rules, just like whatever's going on in Colby Covington's and Ronda Rousey's head. Just dump them in the WWE. We don't need them here. This is not a high school. This is not a playground. I know the fighters act like it sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's time to get into the cage and fucking fight somebody. And Colby Covington just hasn't got it in him anymore. He chewed on his mouthguard against Kamaru Usman in the rematch, and he chewed on his mouthguard against Leon Edwards, and now he's sitting there calling out people that he doesn't want to fight. He's a fucking coward. He's a fucking coward, and it's time to get him out of the UFC. I'm getting worked up again. Look, that's the end of the video. I think we're going to be expecting some news within the next 2 weeks, expected either on Tuesday's matchmaking or Tuesday after's matchmaking about who Ian Garry is going to be fighting. He's going to be fighting Kamaru Usman. Let me know who you think Ian Garry is going to be fighting next, because he needs to be on one of those 2 cards. So put it down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one.